All right, let's dive into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring excerpts from Bitcoin for Dummies.
Okay.
I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Is this just going to be like every other kind of surface level Bitcoin conversation?
All right.
No way. We're going to equip you with like a really solid foundation, enough to impress even your techiest friend, at your next dinner party.
Yeah.
We're going beyond the buzzwords here.
I think what's so interesting about Bitcoin is that it's both cutting edge technology, but at the same time, it's like a throwback to when money was actually a thing.
Right. Right.
Like we're talking gold rushes and pirate treasure.
Yeah.
And it has that same kind of excitement around it, but in the digital world.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of mystery and intrigue,
Yeah.
the book starts with like the origins of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Created by like the pseudonymous Satoshi Nakamoto,
Right.
who to this day nobody knows who this person is or people are or what.
Right. It's like a Sherlock Holmes mystery for the modern age.
It really is. And it just adds to the mystique.
Yeah.
It makes it clear that Bitcoin is a digital currency, but it's so much more than just internet money.
Right. Exactly.
It's really about decentralization.
Yeah, that's a really key point. It's not controlled by a single entity.
Right.
No banks, no governments, no Illuminati or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
It's totally different from the centralized systems that we're all used to.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, yeah.
Bitcoin's supply is capped at 21 million coins. Why 21 million?
Right.
Nobody knows.
It's fascinating, and it sparks so much debate.
Yeah.
I mean, some people think it's totally arbitrary.
Yeah.
And others think it's a deliberate, nod to the idea of scarcity. So, you think about something like gold,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it's in limited supply.
Right.
That's driven its value historically.
Yeah.
So could the same be true for Bitcoin?
It's a really compelling thought, actually. I mean, scarcity is a powerful force in economics. So maybe this limited supply, it helps explain, why Bitcoin has garnered so much attention.
It has to be a factor, right? I mean, the fact that it's scarce combined with, the demand growing creates this dynamic that you just don't see in traditional currencies.
Okay, so let's say somebody is now intrigued.
Right.
They want to get their hands on some Bitcoin.
Uh-huh.
How do they even begin?
Yeah.
Well, the book talks about these things called wallets, which are essentially your digital vault for storing your Bitcoin.
I mean, if you want to participate in the Bitcoin network,
right,
you need some way to store and manage your Bitcoin.
Right.
That's where a wallet comes in.
So the book breaks it down into the four main types of wallets.
Yeah.
Software, hardware, paper, and web. So let's go through these.
Yeah, let's do it.
So a software wallet, that's kind of like an app you would download.
To your phone or your computer.
Right.
It's very convenient for everyday transactions, but it may not be as secure as some of the other options.
Then there's the hardware wallets, which are like physical devices designed for offline storage.
Yeah, that's right.
Offering a much higher level of security.
And then there's paper wallets.
Oh, yeah.
Where you generate your keys and print them out on a piece of paper.
Okay.
Very secure. It's offline, but you got to be careful, Don't want to damage it or lose it.
Right.
It's like burying treasure in your backyard.
And finally, there are web wallets.
Yeah.
Where a third-party service manages your Bitcoin.
Yeah. So you're relying on them to keep your Bitcoin safe.
Yeah.
So each of those has, its own kind of trade-offs between security and convenience.
The book really drives home this idea of private keys and seed phrases.
Yeah.
And it uses this analogy.
Okay.
If your Bitcoin wallet is like a vault,
right,
the private key is the only way key.
That's it.
Lose it and your money is gone, baby.
It's a good reminder that with Bitcoin, you're really in control of your own money.
Right.
Like you're not relying on a bank to keep it safe for you.
Yeah.
You're responsible for keeping those keys safe.
No pressure.
Yeah.
So let's say we've set up a wallet and we've acquired some Bitcoin.
Okay.
How do we actually use it?
Right.
The book goes into Bitcoin transactions and this thing called the blockchain.
Yeah, the blockchain. That's a really fundamental concept to understand.
Right.
It's a public digital ledger that records every single Bitcoin transaction that's ever been made.
So it's not like swiping your credit card where it just goes through instantly.
No, not necessarily. Each transaction has to be confirmed by the network.
Right.
And that can take about 10 minutes per confirmation.
10 minutes. Wow. Okay. Why that? Wait. I mean, in today's world, 10 minutes seems like an eternity.
Well, it's all about security and
Yeah.
preventing fraud. Remember, it's decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no central authority to instantly approve anything.
Right.
So the confirmation process makes sure that every transaction is legitimate.
Right.
And it helps maintain the integrity of the whole network.
So the blockchain is kind of like this digital tamper-proof record book.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's open for anyone to see.
Right.
Which adds this other layer of transparency and accountability.
Yeah, that's really clever. But who's doing all this verifying?
Right. Good question. So that's where the miners come in.
Mysterious miners.
The miners, yeah. They're basically the backbone of the network.
Okay.
They're using their computing power to solve these really complex math problems.
Okay.
And by doing that, they're validating transactions and adding new blocks to the blockchain.
And they get rewarded for their efforts.
That's right. They get rewarded with Bitcoin.
Newly minted Bitcoin. Okay, so it's a pretty cool incentive system. But the book mentions that mining at home is pretty much a no-go these days.
Yeah, that's true.
Why is that? I always pictured miners as like these techie people in their basement.
I mean, it used to be like that in the early days.
Right.
But it's different now. As more miners joined, the difficulty of these math problems just increased exponentially.
Right.
So now you need this like really specialized hardware
and
a lot of electricity just to even have a chance.
So unless you have like a spare data center and a hydroelectric dam in your backyard, it's probably not worth it.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So it's become a much more specialized operation, but there are still ways to, get involved with Bitcoin without actually becoming a miner, right?
Yeah, totally.
The book goes into like how businesses are using Bitcoin. It's not just about speculation and investment, right?
No, not at all. It's actually being used to buy and sell things now.
Interesting. The book lays out a few scenarios for how businesses can start accepting Bitcoin.
Right.
One that caught my eye was Bitcoin auction sites.
Oh, yeah. That's a really cool model.
Right.
Essentially, they're replicating what traditional auction sites do, like eBay, but they're bringing in all the benefits of Bitcoin.
So what are some of those benefits? What makes it different?
Well, for one, Bitcoin transactions are usually faster.
Okay.
And they're cheaper than traditional payment methods.
Right.
So that's really appealing for international transactions, which, usually have those huge fees.
Right, yeah.
And processing delays.
Cross-border payments have always been a pain. Are there any other advantages?
Yeah, I think the book really emphasizes the role of escrow systems in these Bitcoin auctions. So, the escrow system acts as this neutral third party holding the Bitcoin until the buyer and the seller fulfill their obligations.
Right.
So it helps to kind of mitigate risk and build trust in this environment where there's no central authority to oversee everything.
So it's a really clever way to like address this whole trust issue in a peer-to-peer system.
Totally. And, it could be a real game changer for businesses that want to reach a global audience.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just auctions, right? The book talks about how businesses can integrate Bitcoin payments directly into their existing online stores.
Yeah, it's really easy to do.
Really? So if I have an e-commerce website, I can just like add Bitcoin as a payment option relatively easily.
Pretty much, yeah. The book mentions that, platforms like WordPress, which powers, a big chunk of the internet, they have plugins that make it really simple.
Okay.
So you don't need to be some coding genius to start accepting Bitcoin.
That's good news for small business owners.
Correct.
What about brick and mortar stores? Can they accept Bitcoin too?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, more and more of them are, from coffee shops to restaurants to, big retail stores.
Wow. That's interesting because I hadn't really considered that. I guess I always thought of Bitcoin as like, online purchases, but how does that work? Like how do they accept Bitcoin in a physical store?
Well, they're using technology like QR codes and mobile wallets.
Right. QR codes. So how do those fit in? I know they can store information.
Yeah.
But how are they used for payments?
So, a customer can just scan a QR code at the register with their phone, and that automatically pulls up all the payment details in their Bitcoin wallet.
Okay.
And then they can just confirm the transaction with a couple taps.
So it's like a digital version of swiping a credit card.
Exactly, yeah.
That's really cool. It's like technology is bridging the gap between, the physical and the digital world.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The book also mentions these things called Bitcoin payment solutions. What are those all about?
So these are companies like BitPay and Coinbase. They're essentially acting as intermediaries between the Bitcoin world and the traditional financial system.
Okay, so they're helping businesses kind of navigate all the complexities of accepting Bitcoin.
Right.
So they provide the tools and the infrastructure.
They can even instantly convert Bitcoin payments into fiat currency like dollars or euros.
Oh, so they don't even have to worry about like the ups and downs of the Bitcoin price. They can just get paid in Bitcoin and then instantly convert it.
Exactly, yeah. It takes a lot of the risk out of it for businesses.
Right.
And, for customers, it can offer more security and convenience.
Yeah, so it seems like these payment solutions are like playing a key role in making Bitcoin just more accessible and user-friendly for businesses and consumers.
Yeah, exactly.
Bitcoin for Dummies also goes into the security concept called multi-signature wallets.
Yeah, multi-sig wallets. They're really interesting. Imagine, a safe that requires multiple keys to open.
Okay.
That's kind of the idea.
Gotcha.
Behind a multi-signature wallet.
Okay, so instead of one private key controlling the Bitcoin, you have multiple keys that need to be used together.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So the book explains that this is a really useful tool for businesses, families, or any group that wants to share control over some Bitcoin funds.
Okay.
So it adds that extra layer of security.
Right.
And it helps prevent any one person from doing something they shouldn't be doing.
Okay, so it's like a built-in checks and balances system.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be great for businesses.
Yeah.
To manage funds collaboratively or maybe even families.
Right.
Who want to like set up a shared savings account or something.
Yeah, it's a really cool example of how Bitcoin's not just about individual ownership.
Right.
It's about finding these new ways to manage and control these digital assets.
Yeah. All of this is starting to paint a picture of Bitcoin as like, I don't know, more than just a digital currency. It's like a whole new financial ecosystem with its own rules and tools and possibilities.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging our assumptions about how money works.
Right.
It's forcing us to rethink how we do business, how we store value, how we manage risk.
Now, so far, we've been focusing on kind of the positive aspects of Bitcoin, but are there any downsides? I mean, I know we talked about price volatility.
Right.
But what are some of the other potential pitfalls that the book highlights?
Well, one concern that comes up is fraud.
Right.
Particularly something called a double spending attack.
Double spending. Okay, that sounds a little ominous. What exactly does that mean?
So imagine you could spend the same dollar bill twice.
Okay.
That's basically what a double spending attack is trying to do with Bitcoin.
Wait a minute. So somebody could send the same Bitcoin?
In theory, yes.
To multiple people at the same time?
Yeah, in theory, it's possible.
How is that even possible?
It's a bit complicated, but the book does say that these attacks are actually extremely difficult to pull off.
Okay.
Because of the way the Bitcoin network is designed.
Okay, so there are safeguards in place.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does it prevent double spending?
Well, remember the confirmation process that we talked about. Each transaction has to be verified by multiple nodes on the network.
Okay.
And then added to the blockchain. So that creates a permanent and public record of every Bitcoin transaction, which makes it almost impossible to double spend.
So the blockchain acts as a kind of like digital detective, ensuring that each Bitcoin is only spent once.
I like that analogy.
Okay. Yeah.
And the more confirmations a transaction gets, the more secure it becomes.
Okay.
So that's why the book really emphasizes waiting for multiple confirmations before you consider a transaction final.
It sounds like a little bit of a waiting game, but I can see how those confirmations add an extra layer of security. Are there any other concerns?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another issue that comes up a lot is the environmental impact of mining Bitcoin.
Right. Because they're using all these powerful computers
Right, exactly.
to solve the complex math problems, which requires a lot of electricity.
A lot of electricity, yeah.
So is it contributing to carbon emissions?
It's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
And it's something that the Bitcoin community is trying to work on.
So what are like some of the solutions?
Well, there's a push to develop more energy efficient hardware.
Okay.
And to transition to renewable energy sources.
Okay.
Some miners are even setting up in places where there's a lot of hydroelectric or geothermal power to try to minimize their footprint.
So it sounds like there's hope for a more sustainable Bitcoin.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. What about, besides environmental concerns, are there any other challenges that the book talks about?
Well, one big debate is about regulation and government oversight.
Right.
Some people argue that Bitcoin needs more regulation to prevent illicit activities like money laundering and things like that.
Right.
But other people think that that regulation would stifle innovation.
Right.
And go against this whole idea of Bitcoin being decentralized.
So how do you find that sweet spot between protecting consumers and fostering innovation?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And as Bitcoin becomes more mainstream, it's going to be more and more important to find that balance.
It's a fascinating time to be witnessing this, like technological and financial revolution unfold. We've talked about fraud, environmental concerns, regulatory challenges. With all these factors in play, what's the overall outlook for Bitcoin? Is it like a force for good? Is it a potential threat? Or is it something in between?
I mean, that's a question that people have been debating for years.
Right.
The truth is, it's complicated. It's got the potential for both good and bad outcomes.
Right.
You know, it's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad.
So it really comes down to how we choose to use it, how we manage the risks and address the challenges, and how we kind of harness the potential for positive change.
I think that's exactly right, yeah. That's why education is so important.
Right.
The more people understand how this works, you know, the better equipped we'll be to make good decisions about it.
Yeah. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, you know, emerging technologies like this.
That's right.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Bitcoin. Last time, we laid the groundwork, you know, from Bitcoin's mysterious origins to the blockchain. But now I think it's time to get a little more practical. How do you actually use Bitcoin?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Bitcoin for Dummies has some really interesting examples of how this technology is moving beyond theory and into, you know, the real world.
I think what's really cool is how Bitcoin is changing how we think about commerce.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just for techie people anymore.
Right.
Businesses are really starting to understand its potential.
Right. The book gives some scenarios for how businesses can start accepting Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And one that really stood out to me was these Bitcoin auction sites.
Oh, yeah. That's a fascinating model.
Right.
They're basically like replicating traditional auction sites. You think of eBay.
Right.
But with the advantages of Bitcoin.
Okay, so what are those advantages? What makes it different?
Well, for one thing, the transactions are usually faster.
Okay.
And cheaper.
Right.
You know, compared to traditional payment methods.
Right.
And that's a huge deal for international transactions, which, you know, usually have all those fees and delays.
Right. Cross-border payments have always been a nightmare.
Totally, yeah.
Are there other advantages?
Yeah, the book really emphasizes these escrow systems that are used in Bitcoin auctions. The escrow system basically acts as this neutral third party holding the Bitcoin.
Gotcha.
Until both sides, you know, fulfill their end of the bargain.
So it kind of mitigates risk and builds trust.
Exactly.
In a system where there's no central authority, you know, looking over everybody's shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's a really clever way to deal with the trust issue in a peer-to-peer system. It sounds like Bitcoin auctions could really be a game changer for businesses wanting to expand globally.
Absolutely.
And it's not just auctions. The book also talks about how businesses can integrate Bitcoin payments directly into their existing online stores.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy.
Really? So if I have like a website, an e-commerce website, I can just add like a Bitcoin payment option?
Pretty much, yeah. Like WordPress, for example, that powers tons of websites.
Right.
Has these plugins that make it like Super simple.
Okay.
You don't need to be a programmer or anything.
That's good news for small business owners.
Definitely, yeah.
What about brick and mortar stores?
Oh, yeah.
Can they accept Bitcoin?
Yeah, they can. More and more are, actually.
Wow. That's interesting. I always thought of Bitcoin as more of like an online thing,
Right.
But how does it work? Like, how do they accept Bitcoin in a physical store?
Well, they use things like, QR codes and mobile wallets.
Okay, so how do QR codes fit into that? I know they store information,
Yeah.
but how are they used for payments?
So basically, a customer scans the QR code at the register with their phone.
Right.
That pulls up the payment details in their Bitcoin wallet.
Gotcha.
And then they can confirm the transaction.
Okay.
Right there.
So it's kind of like a digital version of swiping your card.
Exactly, yeah. It's pretty slick. It really is. The book also talks about these Bitcoin payment solutions. What are those?
So these are companies like BitPay, Coinbase, for example. They're kind of like the middleman between Bitcoin and traditional finance.
So they help businesses navigate the complexities of Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
So they provide the tools, the infrastructure.
Yeah. And they can even instantly convert those Bitcoin payments into, dollars or euros.
So they don't even have to deal with the fluctuating Bitcoin price.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a lot of the risk away for businesses.
Right.
And it can make things more secure and convenient for customers, too.
So it sounds like these payment solutions are like really key to making Bitcoin more accessible.
Totally.
For businesses and consumers.
Yeah, I think so.
Bitcoin for Dummies also goes into the security concept called multi-signature wallets.
Multi-sig wallets, yeah.
Those are cool. Those safes that require multiple keys to open?
Right.
That's basically the idea behind a multi-signature wallet.
Okay, so instead of just one private key, it's like multiple keys that need to be used together.
Exactly, yeah. The book explains how this can be super useful for businesses.
Right.
For families. Any group, really, that wants to, share control over funds.
Right.
It adds an extra layer of security.
Right.
And it makes sure that no one person can just do whatever they want.
So it's like built-in checks and balances.
Exactly.
Okay, so it could be great for businesses that need to manage funds collaboratively, or maybe families that want to set up like a shared savings account, something like that.
Yeah, it's a good illustration of how Bitcoin isn't just about individuals, owning stuff.
Right.
It can be about new ways to manage and control digital assets.
Yeah. This is really painting a picture of Bitcoin as like more than just digital cash. It's almost like this new financial ecosystem with its own rules and tools and possibilities.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Right.
Yeah, it's changing how we think about money, about finance.
Right.
We have to rethink how we transact, how we store value, how we manage risk, all of it.
Now, up until now, we've been focusing on, kind of the upsides of Bitcoin. But are there any downsides? I mean, we talked about price volatility.
Right.
But are there other potential problems that the book talks about?
One concern that comes up is the potential for fraud.
Okay.
Specifically, something called a double spending attack.
Double spending. Okay, that sounds kind of scary. What does that mean?
Imagine you could spend the same dollar bill twice. Okay. That's essentially what a double spending attack tries to do with Bitcoin.
Wait, so you could send the same Bitcoin to multiple people?
It's possible, in theory.
How is that even possible?
It's a little complicated.
Okay.
But the book says these attacks are really hard to pull off because of how the Bitcoin network is set up.
Okay, so there are safeguards.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So how does it prevent double spending?
Well, remember the confirmation process we talked about?
Yeah.
Every transaction has to be verified.
Okay.
By a bunch of nodes on the network.
Right.
And added to the blockchain. So that creates this, permanent public record of every transaction.
Right.
That makes double spending really, really tough.
So the blockchain is kind of like a digital detective.
Yeah, I like that.
Making sure every Bitcoin is only spent once.
And the more confirmations a transaction gets, the more secure it becomes.
Okay.
That's why the book says it's important to wait for a few confirmations before you think of it as final.
So it's a bit of a waiting game.
Yeah.
But those confirmations, add that extra security.
Yeah, they do.
Are there other concerns the book mentions?
Well, one thing that gets discussed a lot is the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining.
Right, because they're using all those powerful computers
Exactly.
to solve those complex math problems,
Yeah.
which takes a lot of electricity.
It does, yeah.
So is Bitcoin mining like contributing to, climate change and pollution?
It's a valid concern,
Right.
for sure. It's something that the Bitcoin community is working on, though.
So what are some solutions?
Well, there's this push to develop more energy-efficient hardware
Okay.
and to switch to renewable energy sources.
Okay.
Some miners are even setting up in places where there's a lot of like hydroelectric power
Right.
or geothermal power, things like that.
So it sounds like there's hope for a more sustainable Bitcoin future.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Good. Besides the environmental concerns, any other challenges?
Well, there's this ongoing debate
Yeah.
about regulation and government oversight.
Okay.
Some people say Bitcoin needs more regulation
Okay.
to prevent, illegal activity, money laundering, that sort of thing. Others think that regulation would just, stifle innovation
Yeah.
and undermine this whole decentralized idea.
Right. So it's like this balancing act.
Yeah,
So, how do you protect people but also encourage innovation?
Yeah, that's the big question.
It really is. It's fascinating to see this, technological revolution, this financial revolution, all unfolding in real time.
Right.
We've talked about fraud. We've talked about environmental concerns, regulatory challenges. With all this in mind, what's the overall outlook for Bitcoin? I mean, is it a force for good? Is it a potential threat? Is it somewhere in between?
Well, people have been debating that for years.
Right.
The truth is, it's complicated. It can be good. It can be bad.
Right.
It's a tool,
Right.
just like any tool. It depends how you use it.
So it all comes down to how we manage the risks, how we address the challenges, and how we use it for, positive change.
I think that's right. And that's why it's so important for people to learn about it.
Right. Okay.
The more we understand it, the better choices we can make.
Exactly, yeah. Knowledge is power,
Absolutely.
especially with new technologies like this. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Bitcoin for Dummies. We've explored like the fundamentals of Bitcoin, the blockchain, how to use it in everyday life. But Bitcoin isn't the only cryptocurrency out there, right?
No, definitely not.
The book mentions all these like alternative cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
This whole other world.
It's a whole universe of them.
So Bitcoin kind of kicked things off.
Right.
But it also sparked all this creativity.
Yeah, tons of experimentation.
Yeah, yeah. And now there are thousands of these alternative cryptocurrencies, each with like its own thing going on.
Yeah, their own goals, their own features.
Thousands? Wow. That's a lot.
It is, yeah. So it seems like there are new ones popping up every day.
So where do you even begin? How do you wrap your head around it all?
Well, Bitcoin for Dummies gives a few good examples to get us started. One that's often mentioned is Litecoin.
Oh, okay.
Which some people call the silver to Bitcoin's gold.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so that suggests it has similarities to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But also some differences, right?
Right. So Litecoin uses a different algorithm for mining.
Okay.
Which means you need different hardware.
Okay.
And the transactions are confirmed faster.
So it's kind of like a faster, lighter version of Bitcoin.
In some ways, yeah. And Litecoin also has a much larger supply limit.
Okay.
So it might be better suited for smaller everyday transactions.
Okay, so it's like different tools for different jobs. Bitcoin for bigger things, and then Litecoin for your daily coffee or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
What other altcoins should we know about?
Well, there's Dogecoin.
Oh,
which is hard to ignore.
Right. Dogecoin. The one with the dog, right?
Yeah, they're Shiba Inu.
Yeah, I remember that. It was everywhere, like a few years ago.
Yeah, it was huge.
It started as a joke, right?
Yeah, it was a meme. But then it really took off.
It did, yeah. It got a really dedicated following.
Wow. So it just shows you never know what's going to, capture the internet's attention.
Totally, yeah. And Dogecoin's been used for some cool stuff, like charitable donations.
Oh, wow.
It even sponsored a NASCAR team at one point.
That's crazy. Okay, so Dogecoin's just one example.
Uh-huh.
And there are tons more of these altcoins out there, right?
Yeah, tons. Each one trying to improve on Bitcoin in some way. Some are focused on privacy.
Okay.
Some on speed. Some on energy efficiency.
Right. It's like this whole explosion of digital currencies. It's pretty exciting.
It is, yeah. It can be overwhelming though.
It can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
So how do you keep up with all of it? How do you know what's going on?
Well, there are some good resources out there. Bitcoin for Dummies lists a few websites
Okay.
where you can stay up to date.
Okay, lay it on me. what are some of the like go-to resources?
One of the oldest and biggest is the Bitcoin Talk forums.
It's like a huge hub
Yeah.
for discussion and news and technical analysis. You can even trade there.
Oh, wow. So it's like a digital town square
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
for Bitcoin.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if you want like a more curated news experience,
Right.
there are some dedicated websites, right?
Yeah. Bitcoin Magazine, CoinDesk, Bitcoinist.
Okay. Yeah.
They all have really in-depth coverage.
Cool. Cool. Those sound like great resources. Any other platforms that really stand out?
Yeah, the book mentions this website called fiatleak.com
Okay.
that shows you the global Bitcoin market,
Okay.
like visually.
Yeah.
It's a real-time map of Bitcoin buy orders
Oh, wow.
happening all over the world.
Okay.
You can actually watch the flow of Bitcoin transactions.
That's awesome. I bet that's really cool to see. What about resources? Like if you want to actually start using Bitcoin, in the real world.
Yeah, well, they recommend coinmap.org.
Okay.
It's basically a directory of businesses that accept Bitcoin
Oh, cool.
all over the world.
So it's like a Yelp for Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. It'd be
Yeah.
so cool to use Bitcoin for like my daily coffee, groceries,
Right.
my haircut, everything.
Yeah, that's the dream for a lot of Bitcoin fans.
Right.
And these platforms like CoinMap are helping make it happen.
Yeah, it's really exciting to think about the future of Bitcoin and this whole world of cryptocurrencies.
It is, yeah. We've come such a long way
Right.
from those early days.
It really does feel like we're just getting started.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Hmm.
And whether you're, already trading crypto or just starting to learn about Bitcoin,
Right.
there's always more to discover.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Bitcoin for Dummies. We've covered the basics, the practical applications, the challenges, the opportunities, even ventured into the world of altcoins. Hopefully you're feeling a lot more confident
Yeah.
about this whole world of cryptocurrency.
Knowledge is power, especially in this space. Keep learning, stay curious.
Yeah,
Who knows, you might discover the next big thing.
absolutely. That's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, happy crypto venturing.